When the street whispers secrets to destiny, few listen, but she whispers all the same. In cracked sidewalks, in lampposts that flicker for no reason, in the hurried footsteps of those already too late for their own lives. There, amid the muffled roar of engines and the buzz of muted thoughts, the world reveals tiny scenes of miracles disguised as coincidence. It was late afternoon, one of those when the sky seems trapped between yellow and gray. And the heat, that stifling heat that seems to rise from inside your skin more than from the asphalt, invaded everything with the same density as a silence no one dares break. The suffocating heat as a mirror of stifled souls. People who live but don't breathe, who speak but say nothing, who smile but twist inside. In this nearly motionless setting where time seems tired of itself, a car sat stalled in the middle of the street, dead, motionless, like so many that keep moving on the outside but have already gone dark within. It was an expensive car, black, flawless on the outside. Yet there, immobile, it looked like a body without a soul, a metaphor for suspended lives, a silent warning that even the best oiled gears can fail. It stood there, hood up as though it were an exposed heart, and no one approached, no one touched it, maybe out of fear, maybe out of indifference, or maybe because there are pains everyone sees but no one knows how to touch without getting burned, until the footsteps came, small, light, almost imperceptible. Yet inside them was a quiet strength. It wasn't haste. It was presence, courage disguised as normality, footsteps that sound like unheard prayers, steps from someone who owns little but carries a kind of wealth that makes no noise. She arrived just like that, without ceremony, without intrusion. She simply appeared, a girl, simple clothes, hands smeared by a day far too long, and eyes that looked older than the rest of her body. She glanced at the car, then at the man beside it, tense, frozen, sweating more than normal. He didn't truly see her, not at first, because those who live high up rarely look down, not out of arrogance, but out of habit, because the world teaches that staring too hard can awaken truths you can no longer pretend not to see. And still, she stayed, watching, feeling, as if she could hear not only the car's silence, but also the man's beside it. Sometimes destiny doesn't shout. It whispers, and whoever hears it changes everything. The key turned, but nothing responded. Not a click, not a sigh. It was as if the car had decided to give up, maybe from exhaustion, maybe in protest. Because even machines, when used only as a shield against emptiness, one day stop. The man sighed, one of those heavy sighs where breathing brings no relief, only confirms a weight inside. And into that vacuum she stepped, slowly, a slender body, but eyes steady. She looked at the engine as you'd look at a wounded child, and with precise fingers she began to touch. No word spoken, no questions asked, only action. The snap was almost imperceptible, a metallic note breaking the silence like an intimate thunderclap. The girl had found something loose, a trivial piece, a misseated wire, or maybe it was destiny itself disguised as a technical fault. The man, stunned, watched without comprehension. Who was she? Where had she come from? How did she know? But she offered no explanation. None was needed. Sometimes life sends answers with small hands and unknown names. They don't come to impress. They come to remind us that miracles hide even in a screwdriver. The engine coughed, then rumbled, then sang, like an old friend finding the way home. The sound filled the street like a signal. Something had changed, not only in the car, in the air, in the man. He breathed as if surfacing from a dive too long. He thanked her, half lost for words. She smiled lightly, not from vanity, but from peace. As someone accustomed to fixing things never meant for her to mend, and who mends them anyway, because her eyes see what others can't, because her hands learn to turn shards into bridges. And then, as she slipped the screwdriver back into her pocket, that rusty tool seemingly forgotten by time, he noticed a gesture, small, almost invisible. But in that gesture, the improbable became inevitable. Her gaze fixed on his hand, more precisely on the ring he wore, a thick old band with the letters HD engraved inside. That's when time stopped. And the engine, moments ago roaring with life, now seemed mere backdrop to something far greater. Because some pieces, when they fit, make no sound. They make history. She saw it, the ring, not just with her eyes, but with something deeper, more ancestral, as if rediscovering a scar that never properly healed. Small circumference, infinite memories. Her fingers hung in the air hesitant, as though they'd touched fire. Her smile faded, not in sadness, but in quiet shock, because there are marks time doesn't erase. It only hides in cracks of the soul. And in that ring, so mundane to one who wears it daily, there was a whole universe suspended. HD etched within, a hurried signature from someone who didn't know how much it would hurt later. The man sensed a change, but he couldn't name it. He only felt it, like entering a room and realizing the air is thickened, that something unseen occupies the space. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. But her eyes said it all, and his silently confirmed. It wasn't merely an object. It was a link, an echo, a memory that hid behind figures, contracts, and decisions that seemed correct on paper, but collapsed in the soul. A jewel leaping from trash to crown a cosmic encounter. Because sometimes what was discarded returns as living proof that destiny never forgets. He touched the ring instinctively, tried to shield it, but it was too late. She had already recognized, not the gold, but the emptiness, not the inscription, but the silence around it. It was as if the ring declared, "I was here even when you weren't." And she, wordless, looked at him like staring at a photograph ripped in half. The unspoken question tore through everything. Why? Yet the heart isn't always ready to answer what the soul already knows. It was there, in that suspended minute, that the ground beneath them became a bridge, not asphalt, but connection between what lacked and what might still be. Because the past, when it finds courage in the present, can stop being a prison and become a portal. And the man, still not fully understanding, knew something inside him had been found. Not repaired, found. And that is sometimes more powerful than any fix. She didn't ask for explanations, nor did he offer any, for between them now lay something stronger than doubt. Recognition. A familiarity that needed no words would impose itself like wind on a hot afternoon. Silent yet impossible to ignore. She averted her gaze, returning to the engine, as if trying to distract her heart with grease and rust. And he, the image of her trapped behind his eyelids, realized there was something in that girl that reminded him very much of himself. But in another life, or perhaps in a life he tried to bury. She was born of asphalt, raised among horns and broken promises. Her school bell was red traffic lights, unnameable alleys, muffled shouts from closed windows. That's where her skills came from, not manuals, but necessity. Old tools turned into wands of urban alchemy. Each bolt tightened away to say, "I'm still here." Every engine brought back to life was a cry of resistance. Because whoever learns to fix what's broken outside, one day discovers they can stitch what's torn inside. The man watched closely. For the first time, without haste, without distraction. That girl was no accident in his script. She was an answer, a mirror, a walking open wound. And he realized, as only someone who has had everything can recognize what truly matters, that there was more wisdom in her than in any board meeting. Her gaze was direct, clear, hard. She asked for nothing. She simply saw. She saw everything. The engine, the silence, the absence. And that unsettled him. Because money doesn't protect you from what comes from within. She looked back at him, but not as someone inferior. There was dignity in that gaze. There was choice. She preferred analysis to alms. She didn't need him to save her. She did that daily, not with words but with presence, not with theory but with practice. Survival was her specialty, and in that encounter, unknowingly, she taught him how to live. Not the way he was taught, with contracts and profits, but the costly way, with the courage to feel. Their silence was cut by a harsher sound, a sharp call from across the street. A woman, pressed clothes, tense face, cell phone in hand like an extension of control itself. Her eyes landed on the girl with the urgency of someone hauling back what is slipping away. In that instant, everything became clear. She wasn't just a sister. She was a wall, a contingency plan, love dressed as calculation, tenderness locked in vaults. She had the cool voice of someone who learned that showing too much affection can be read as weakness. So she controlled everything: tone, time, affection. The girl hesitated. For a second, she wanted to stay, but her sister's eyes were both compass and cage. She obeyed, walking toward her. The man watched in silence. Not for the first time did he see love disguised as rigidity, but maybe it was the first time he recognized it outside himself. The sister spoke in clipped phrases, checked her watch, avoided direct eye contact with him. Something else was there, not just fear, greed, like a wall built on absences, as if trying to compensate with power what was lost in affection. The man wanted to intervene, but didn't know how. What do you say to someone who molds love with formulas of precision? How do you tell them that protecting isn't erasing, that caring isn't silencing? So he simply watched. The girl, once light, now seemed smaller, body hunched, shoulders tense. But her gaze still resisted, carrying the spark of someone who knows freedom, even if only for minutes. As they walked away, he saw, in gestures, in the silence between words, in the grip on her arm, the pain of relationships that confuse control with love, that build prisons out of good intentions. And he knew then that the girl wasn't the only one trapped in that labyrinth. The sister was captive too, to a past she never reshaped, to an absence she masked with numbers, routines, and goals, to a fear she tried to crush by mastering everything around her, except herself. The next day the man returned to that street, not because the car needed it, but because his soul did. Something unresolved tugged him back, a loose thread pulling him home. Not the girl herself, exactly, but what she represented, that which he couldn't name, but felt beating. The memory of the ring on his finger, of her eyes recognizing it, like finding an old letter written in a hand no longer used. Part of him knew those pages were somewhere waiting to be read, waiting too long. He walked to the clinic she'd mentioned, still unsure how to ask for someone with no name. But stepping inside, he was overcome by a feeling long absent. Humanity. The place was plain, yet each wall seemed to listen. Every chair recalled a wait too long, a confessional of urgencies where pain spoke louder than voices. He didn't request information. He just observed. And then he saw, on a makeshift shelf, among faded notices and forgotten pamphlets, a cardboard box marked with an old name, his name, and inside letters that never arrived. Yellowed paper, tired folds, ink near invisible. But he knew every word. Letters from a woman he hadn't seen in years, written with love, fear, longing. Letters that tried to find him but got lost between change of address slips, rushed decisions, and silences chosen as a shield. Shipwrecked correspondence that, even so, could swim to the right shore. Some words a breath of their own, and always find a way back. He read them there, standing, hands trembling, the paper absorbing old tears that never had space to fall. It felt like hearing his own story for the first time, a version told by someone who never stopped believing he'd return. Each sentence was a bridge between what was said and what was kept, between the man he became and the boy still waiting for answers. And for the first time in ages, he felt, without reserve, without defenses, because some truths aren't debated, they're lived. Some letters, though late, arrive exactly when you're ready. That night, he didn't sleep. The letters, now tucked in his pocket like silent relics, weighed more than any stock portfolio. A weight that didn't hurt but reminded of what was unspoken, denied, feared. And as dawn filtered through the window cracks, he resolved to dig deeper. He had to see where that story touched his own, to understand why the girl, that ring, those words wouldn't leave his chest. He went to the old address where he recalled a brief, broken childhood. The place had changed, yet the walls seemed to harbor secrets. Scarred doors, windows locked despite the heat, and at the corners a hush of those who've learned speaking can cost dearly. There he saw Zay, a stooped man, downcast eyes, slow gait, but with the aura of someone who knows more than he tells. Zay recognized him, but didn't smile. He merely nodded. "I remember." a silhouette bearing the weight of contracted silence. They walked together a few yards, without hurry, without destination. And Zay spoke, sparingly, yet he spoke. He told of veiled threats, of agreements struck in shadow, of promises traded for safety, of walls louder than human mouths, of how fear educated better than any school in that neighborhood. Fear's strict teacher, courage the rebellious student. Between Zay's lines he understood why the girl sister was as she was, why the girl bore so much and spoke so little. He even understood himself, a quiet boy dressed as a successful adult. In that neighborhood, survival was art, being invisible a gift, speaking little armor. And he, who spent years trying to forget that place, now saw he'd never truly left. He carried those streets bricks inside his chest. Perhaps that's why, on seeing the girl, he felt she was his, without knowing why. Some ties don't unravel. They only sleep, waiting for the right time to be remembered. Somehow the street had swallowed him back, as if time made a full circle, returning him to where everything began, but with new eyes. And in those eyes now lived something he never truly had. Intention, the will to stay, not physically but emotionally, not to run anymore, not to excuse silence with professional pretexts, to face the roots, even if they'd grown crooked. The girl lived in an improvised house smelling of weak coffee and peeling paint, rented by the grandmother, who mixed pension money with prayers to keep the roof standing. The girl slept on the floor, on a mattress too thin for her tired body, but still better than the concrete she'd grown used to. Soft mattresses scare those who learn to sleep on cement. Too much comfort feels suspicious, temporary, false. He went there, not in executive clothes, not with promises, only with presence. He knocked like someone asking permission of his own history. The grandmother eyed him warily, then with surprise, then with that acceptance only the very old can give. She let him in. He sat. No words were spoken at first. Just the kettle's whistle and the girl's eyes fixed on the floor, as if she were deciding if this was dream, threat, or miracle. "If your return bring grape juice," she said, barely a voice, barely breath, barely will. Yet she said it. And then he understood that was a pact. Small, simple, symbolic, but a pact. Promises of staying aren't made with speeches. They're made with gestures, with returns, with the humility of someone who arrives late, but still whole. He nodded. In that nod, everything changed. It was there in that fragile house that rebuilding began, not with renovations, but with bonds, not with solutions, but with listening. Sometimes a true home isn't where you live, but the space where you're seen, accepted with every crack, where even silence becomes an embrace. And in that hush he promised, this time he would stay. Nothing involving deep affection escapes human justice unscathed. At the notary's office, among sealed papers and dry stares, the reunion turned into battle, because ties that bind can also wound, especially when history is unresolved, absence disguised, decisions born of fear. The girl's mother, missing for years. The grandmother, silent guardian of love. And now him, the one who once left, unaware of what he abandoned. It was inevitable someone would have to answer. In courtrooms, feelings don't count. Proof does, documents do, versions dress as truth. The petition was filed. He didn't want to take away. He wanted to add. Yet the paper spoke of custody, visitation, parental authority. Words that don armor, lies that wear silk. The sister, the one who survived through numbers and silence, contested. She said it was too late, that everything was structured, that you don't dismantle a life on emotional impulse. Deep down, she just wanted to protect what remained. But overprotecting is also a way of hurting. On hearing day, the room was cold, chairs aligned like ranks of an emotional army. The judge, weary of tales mixing abandonment and hope. But there was something different, a sparkle in the girl's eyes, a desire to be heard. And she spoke, softly yet firmly. She told the car, the ring, the grape juice. She spoke with the simplicity of someone who cannot make speeches but can tell truth. A child's voice echoes louder than marble walls. The judge didn't rule by statute. He ruled by intuition, perhaps by compassion, perhaps because he saw something rare in the eyes of that man and girl. Mutual will. In the end, the sentence wasn't a victory. It was a crossing, a risk all accepted, a chance to relearn. The judge as lighthouse guiding through fogs of affection. Justice doesn't always get right, but sometimes it feels. And when it feels, something human still beats in the system. There was no manual, no preparation. Only the next day and the silence of their first morning together. He used the tight agendas and homes too vast for one. She, accustomed to street noise and invisible codes of survival. Two strangers linked by something they couldn't name. DNA, the notary of molecular truth. Yet truth doesn't forge bond. Routine does. Looks do. Listening does. She arrived with few things. A worn backpack, a thin pillow, a crumpled drawing from when she still believed everything could be colorful. He didn't know what to do with that. With her silence, her presence, his presence before her. Because being a father isn't a title you sign. It's a place you inhabit slowly, with stumbles, with shocks, with successes born after many errors. The house, once silent and organized, became something else. Rooms gained sound, scent, color. The kitchen turned stage for small lessons. How not to burn toast, how to listen without interrupting, how to wait for her timing. Hugs knocking down walls erected over decades, arriving not easily but in fragments, as if each touch said, "I'm trying," as if each attempt whispered, "I don't know, but I'm staying." He began to grasp that fatherhood isn't imposed presence. It's offered and accepted if genuine. That love isn't demanded. It's built. That trust isn't born from pretty words, but from constancy. The art of learning to be family without an instruction manual. Day by day, what was improvisation became routine, and what was fear turned into bond. He, who'd spent life accumulating possessions, now collected moments. And she, who'd spent life fearing absences, now began trusting presences. Being a father wasn't his plan. It was what chose him. And at last he understood it wasn't only she who was being raised. He too was being born, more whole, more true, more human. Life didn't return to perfect, but perhaps it began to be real. The girl no longer slept on the floor. She had her own room, where she taped drawings on walls, filling old void with strokes of hope. The living room sofa, once just a design piece, turned into a throne for lazy afternoons, shared blankets. Films paused by conversations that needed no conclusion. Pizza with stuffed crust. Bare feet. Silences that welcomed instead of pushing away. He began to laugh, truly laugh, at small things, as if finally allowing lightness to enter the door he'd always kept locked. And she, still with eyes too old for her age, now looked at the world with less distrust. Not because everything was safe, but because she knew if she fell, there was somewhere to return. For someone who's always lived on alert, that's luxury. Guilt didn't vanish, but it stopped ruling, dissolved in the grace of a late "I'm sorry," in the beauty of the imperfect, in the humility of choosing truth over control. And that house, made of cement and restarted memories, became refuge, not of bodies, but of bonds, of shared silences, of looks that say, "I know," of small gestures that scream, "I'm here." An unlikely family, eternal possibility. Because sometimes what begins with a broken car on asphalt becomes a bridge. What seems coincidence turns destiny. And what seemed too late becomes perfect timing. And that late afternoon, between a slice of pizza and a scribble drawn with a dull pencil, night hesitated. And instead of darkening, it dawned inside. If the story touched something in you, if at any moment you felt it spoke to your soul, then this channel is yours too. Here, every video is a silent mirror for those fighting battles no one sees. Subscribe and ring the bell, because sometimes all we need is a calm voice telling a story that feels like our own.